Have you ever reached the end of a day and realized you were awake the entire time but somehow never truly present? You prayed, you answered messages, you handled responsibilities, you moved from one task to another. Nothing dramatic happened, nothing obviously sinful happened, yet something feels missing. Think of a 29-year-old professional finishing another ordinary day. He closes his laptop, checks a few messages, scrolls through his phone for 20 minutes, prays Isha, watches another video, falls asleep. Tomorrow will look almost identical. 6 months later, he feels strangely empty. Not because he abandoned Allah, not because he stopped believing, because he drifted without noticing. And this is one of the most frightening realities of spiritual life. Most people imagine losing their connection to Allah would feel like an earthquake. They imagine rebellion, a crisis, a dramatic collapse, but often it feels like routine, like repetition, like autopilot, like becoming so occupied with life that you slowly forget why life was given to you in the first place. Allah warns in Surah Al-Anbiya, mankind's reckoning has drawn near while they remain heedless, not rebellious, not denying. Heedless, and Ibn Arabi makes a startling claim. The greatest veil between a human being and Allah is not ignorance, it is heedlessness. Because ignorance knows it lacks knowledge, heedlessness believes it is already awake. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what Ghaflah is, why it silently steals years from your life, how it in Arabi explains its mechanics, and most importantly, how to recognize it before it becomes the hidden story of your entire existence. Within the next few minutes, we are going to uncover why Ghaflah is not simply forgetting Allah, but forgetting what is actually real. Then we will look at how Ghaflah disguises itself as productivity, success, and even religious activity. Then Ibn Arabi will show us why most people cannot recognize their own heedlessness while they are inside it. Then we will examine how Ghaflah changes your experience of time itself. After that, we will explore the deeper paradox that heedlessness is not a lack of knowledge but a crisis of perception. And finally, we will look at 3 practical ways to wake up before more of your life slips away unnoticed. One of the strange features of modern life is that we know more than ever and understand less than ever. You can learn Islamic history in a few hours. Listen to tafsir while driving. Watch lectures while exercising. Read books on your phone. Consume endless content about productivity, purpose, health, spirituality, and self-improvement. Yet many sincere Muslims carry a quiet question inside themselves. If I know what matters, why do I keep living as if it doesn't? That question sits at the center of Ghaflah. Muhyiddin ibn Arabi was not merely a poet describing mystical experiences. He was one of the most sophisticated thinkers in Islamic intellectual history. Across Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, he repeatedly returns to a single concern: how human beings perceive reality, and why they continually mistake appearances for truth. According to Ibn Arabi, people do not mainly suffer from a shortage of information, they suffer from veils. Hijab, layers of perception that distort what they see. And one of the greatest of these veils is Ghaflah, heedlessness, a state in which the heart becomes occupied with secondary realities, while forgetting the source that gives reality to everything else. Allah describes this condition in Surah Al-Araf. They have hearts with which they do not understand. Notice the verse does not say they lack hearts. The faculty exists. The perception does not. Modern psychology calls something similar attentional blindness. Researchers discovered that people can completely miss obvious realities when attention is captured elsewhere. In the famous invisible gorilla experiment, Participants focused so intensely on one task that many never saw a person in a gorilla suit walk directly through the scene. The object was present. The perception was absent. Ibn Arabi described this same mechanism centuries earlier through the language of veils and heedlessness. Science describes what is happening. Ibn Arabi tells you what to do about it. And this is where our discussion begins. Because most conversations about Ghaflah stop at remembering Allah more often. Ibn Arabi goes further. He asks a much more unsettling question. What if your entire way of seeing the world has quietly become heedless? Think of a 22-year-old university student. Her alarm rings. Before she even leaves bed, she opens her phone. A notification becomes a message. The message becomes a video. The video becomes another recommendation. 47 minutes disappear. Throughout the day she moves between lectures, podcasts, assignments, social media, news updates, and conversations. By night she feels exhausted. Yet if someone asked what truly occupied her attention all day, she would struggle to answer. This is exactly what Ibn Arabi is describing. In Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, Ibn Arabi repeatedly writes about the heart as the locus of tajalli, the place where divine self-disclosure is received. The heart was created for witnessing, for recognizing, for perceiving, but the heart can become occupied. Not destroyed, not corrupted beyond repair. Occupied, that distinction matters. Because the problem is not the existence of forms. The problem is becoming absorbed in them. Imagine standing before a magnificent stained glass window illuminated by sunlight. The purpose of the window is to reveal the light. But instead of looking through it, you become obsessed with a layer of dust resting on the surface. The dust captures your attention. The sunlight disappears from awareness. The light never left. Your attention did. This is one of Ibn Arabi's deepest observations. The world itself is not the enemy. Forms are not the enemy. Work is not the enemy. Family is not the enemy. Technology is not the enemy. The problem begins when forms become so captivating that they replace what they were supposed to reveal. Have you noticed how often you finish an entire day unable to remember where your attention actually went? You remember being busy. You remember being occupied. But you cannot remember being present. And here is where this gets uncomfortable. Most people think distraction is the problem. Ibn Arabi goes further. Distraction is only the beginning. The real danger is identification. At first, distraction interrupts awareness. Eventually, distraction becomes normal. Then it becomes identity. You stop experiencing interruption because interruption becomes your default state. You no longer feel scattered. Scattered becomes familiar. This is why Ghaflah is so difficult to detect. The person drowning in water knows he is wet. The person drowning in distraction often believes he is functioning normally. Modern psychology calls this attentional capture. Researchers have found that the brain naturally prioritizes novelty, stimulation, and interruption. Entire industries are designed around this tendency. Ibn Arabi described this same mechanism centuries earlier through the language of the heart becoming occupied by passing forms. Science describes what is happening. Ibn Arabi tells you what it means. And what it means is frightening. Because whatever repeatedly owns your attention begins shaping your reality. The things you consistently notice become the world you inhabit. The things you consistently ignore gradually disappear from experience. This is why two people can live in the same city, walk the same streets, and inhabit entirely different realities. One sees signs, the other sees obstacles. One sees reminders, the other sees inconveniences. One sees Allah's generosity, the other sees only transactions. The external world remains unchanged. Attention changes, and with it, reality changes. Ask yourself honestly, what captures you most easily? What occupies your mind when nobody is demanding anything from you? Where does your awareness run when left unattended? Because that answer reveals more than your habits. It reveals your orientation, your direction, your hidden Qibla. What owns your attention eventually shapes your reality. But if attention can be captured so easily, then a deeper question emerges. What happens when heedlessness no longer looks like distraction at all? What happens when it starts looking responsible? Think of a 38-year-old father. He wakes early, works hard, provides for his family, pays every bill, attends every meeting, solves every problem. People respect him. His children admire him. His community praises him. And yet every year feels strangely identical. A quiet distance grows inside him. Whenever he notices it, he tells himself, "I'm just busy." This is exactly what Ibn Arabi is describing. In Fusus al-Hikam, particularly in discussions surrounding the wisdom of Adam, Ibn Arabi repeatedly warns that human beings confuse forms with meanings. They mistake appearances for realities. The form appears correct, the meaning remains absent. The action exists, the witnessing does not. Imagine a captain spending years polishing the deck of a ship. Every plank shines, every rope is organized, every surface is immaculate. Meanwhile, the vessel has drifted hundreds of miles off course. Everything looks maintained, nothing is directed. That is a terrifying image, because many people assume Ghaflah exists only in obvious sins, only in neglecting prayer, only in abandoning religious obligations. But Ibn Arabi's framework introduces a far more uncomfortable possibility. You can be productive, respected, religious, disciplined, and still spiritually asleep. Most people stop here. Ibn Arabi goes further. He asks whether activity itself can become a veil. Not because activity is wrong, because activity can prevent confrontation. Think carefully about this. How many people remain busy because stillness would force honesty? How many schedules are filled not merely with obligations, but with avoidance? How many achievements exist partly to prevent difficult questions from being asked? Questions like, who am I becoming? Why am I pursuing this? What am I actually serving? What am I afraid to face? Modern psychology calls this experiential avoidance. Researchers have found that people often use constant activity to avoid uncomfortable emotions or difficult truths. Ibn Arabi described the same pattern through the language of veils. The nafs keeps itself occupied so that deeper realities remain unseen. Science describes what is happening. Ibn Arabi tells you what it is costing. And what it costs is not merely time, it costs direction. A person can spend decades moving quickly while traveling nowhere. That possibility terrifies the soul. Because deep down, you already know there have been moments when you felt this. Moments when your calendar was full, your responsibilities were handled, your religious duties were completed. Yet something inside whispered, there must be more than this. Not more possessions, not more achievements, more presence, more reality, more witnessing. The tragedy of Ghaflah is not that it makes life empty. The tragedy is that it can make emptiness look successful. And this is why Ibn Arabi keeps returning to perception. Because external appearances reveal very little. The heart tells the real story. A person may stand in prayer while thinking only of himself. Another may earn a living while feeling profound dependence upon Allah. The same action, different realities, the same form, different meanings. Ask yourself honestly, When was the last time you paused long enough to ask why you are doing what you are doing? Not what. Why? Because that single question often reveals whether an action is guiding you toward Allah or distracting you from Him. A busy life can be the most sophisticated form of escape. But there is an even deeper layer to this. Because if heedlessness can disguise itself as responsibility, how do you recognize it at all? And what if the thing preventing you from seeing it is the very self trying to see? Think of a man in his 40s. He spends hours discussing society's problems, politics, culture, family decline, the ummah. Every conversation becomes a diagnosis of everyone else's blindness. He sees hypocrisy everywhere, confusion everywhere, neglect everywhere, yet he rarely questions himself. This is exactly what Ibn Arabi is describing. In Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, Ibn Arabi repeatedly warns that the nafs itself becomes a veil, not merely a source of temptation, a veil, a hijab, something standing between the servant and reality. And the most dangerous feature of this veil is that it rarely presents itself as blindness. It presents itself as certainty. Imagine looking through a dirty lens. The dirt affects every image you see. Yet because the lens is the thing doing the seeing, it remains invisible to itself. Everything appears distorted. The lens remains unquestioned. This is why self-deception is so powerful. The nafs rarely says, "You are blind." It says, "You see more clearly than everyone else." Have you noticed this tendency in yourself? The ease with which you identify flaws in others. The difficulty of identifying the same flaws in your own heart. Allah says in Surah Al-Hashr, "Do not be like those who forgot Allah, so He caused them to forget themselves." Notice the sequence. They forgot Allah, then they forgot themselves. This is one of the most profound descriptions of Ghaflah in the Quran. Because the deepest heedlessness is not forgetting information about Allah. The deepest heedlessness is forgetting your need for Allah. That changes the diagnosis completely. Now Ghaflah is no longer about memory. It becomes about dependence. The heedless person still believes, still prays, still speaks about religion, but subtly begins living as though he is self-sufficient. His plans feel sufficient. His intelligence feels sufficient. His discipline feels sufficient. His understanding feels sufficient. The heart slowly shifts its center of gravity. And here is the emotional beat many people recognize immediately. The same nafs that once wanted status in the world can begin wanting status in religion. The same ego that once wanted admiration for wealth can start wanting admiration for piety. The costume changes. The nature remains. Have you felt this? The desire to be seen as sincere. The desire to be recognized as knowledgeable. The desire to become attached to an image of yourself. This is why Ibn Arabi spends so much time discussing self-knowledge. Because the greatest obstacles are rarely external. They are internal. Modern psychology calls this blind spot bias. Researchers consistently find that people identify biases more easily in others than in themselves. Ibn Arabi described this same reality centuries earlier through the language of the nafs becoming a veil. Science describes what is happening. Ibn Arabi tells you where to look. Look inward. Not obsessively, not neurotically. Honestly, because the greatest danger is not weakness. The greatest danger is unconsciousness. A weak person knows he struggles. An unconscious person believes he has already arrived. And that is why the deepest ghaflah often appears among those most convinced they are awake. The hardest veil to remove is the one wearing your face. But even this is not the final consequence. Attention can be captured. Purpose can be obscured. Self-awareness can be distorted. What happens when all three continue for decades? The answer is devastating. Because eventually, Ghaflah begins stealing something you can never recover. Time. Think of a 55-year-old man attending a school reunion. Old friends gather around him. Someone smiles and asks, "So, how have the last 20 years been?" He opens his mouth, then pauses. Because the answer frightens him, they disappeared. This is exactly what Ibn Arabi is describing. In Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, Ibn Arabi repeatedly connects wakefulness with Huda presence before Allah. Presence means inhabiting reality consciously. Heedlessness means passing through reality unconsciously. The difference seems small. Its consequences are enormous. Imagine owning a library filled with priceless books. Every day one volume quietly disappears. You never notice. No alarm sounds. No shelves collapse. Years later you walk inside and discover most of the collection is gone. That is how Ghaflah treats a human life. Not dramatically, gradually, almost politely, one unnoticed day at a time. And this is where all the previous teachings converge. Attention was captured. Purpose became obscured. Self-awareness weakened. Now the final consequence appears. Life itself begins disappearing. Most people think the tragedy of life is making mistakes. Ibn Arabi suggests something deeper. The tragedy is remaining unchanged. Years pass. The soul remains where it was. Experiences accumulate, awareness does not. Responsibilities increase, presence does not. The outer life expands. The inner life remains asleep. Have you ever looked at old photographs and felt shocked by how much time has passed? Not because you forgot the events, because you never fully inhabited them while they were happening. This is one of the hidden pains of adulthood. People do not merely lose years, they lose awareness within years. And then they wonder why life feels so brief. Allah swears by time in Surah Al-Asr. Why? Because human beings lose it so easily. The Quran repeatedly connects heedlessness with wasted life, because time is the raw material of the soul. Every moment shapes something. Every moment leaves a trace. The Prophet said, "Be in this world as though a stranger or traveler." A traveler understands something the heedless person forgets. Every step matters because the journey is temporary. The traveler does not build permanent identities around temporary stations. The traveler remembers where he is going. Ghaflah makes people forget not only their destination, their journey. And then comes the terrifying realization mentioned in the Quran. People will say they remained only a day or part of a day. Why? Because life experienced unconsciously feels astonishingly short when viewed from eternity. Ask yourself honestly, if someone asked you how the last 5 years shaped your soul, what would you say? Not your career, not your finances, not your achievements, your soul. Could you answer clearly, or would silence appear first? Ghaflah is how years vanish while the soul remains unchanged. But this still leaves one final mystery. If heedlessness steals attention, purpose, self-awareness, and time, what exactly is its root? This is the part most Islamic content never reaches. The common assumption is simple. Wakefulness means remembering Allah more often. That is true, but Ibn Arabi insists it is incomplete. In Fusus al-Hikam, particularly in discussions surrounding the wisdom of Hud, he repeatedly emphasizes the necessity of seeing signs beyond appearances. And this reveals something astonishing. Ghaflah is not merely forgetting Allah, it is forgetting that everything is already pointing to Him. The heedless person unconsciously divides reality. Work belongs here, worship belongs there. Family belongs here, spirituality belongs there. Ordinary life belongs here, sacred life belongs there. Ibn Arabi dismantles this division. Every created thing is an ayah, a sign, a disclosure, a manifestation, a reminder. The problem is not that Allah is hidden. The problem is that perception has become fragmented. The heart no longer sees connections. It sees isolated objects, separate experiences, disconnected events. But reality is not disconnected. The rain, the sunrise, the conversation, the difficulty, the blessing, the delay, the success, the disappointment, all of them point beyond themselves. This is why Ibn Arabi's diagnosis is so radical. The opposite of Ghaflah is not merely increased religious activity, it is correct perception. A person may spend hours performing acts of worship while remaining inwardly distracted. Another may observe a sunset and experience overwhelming dependence upon Allah. That statement makes many people uncomfortable, because it shifts attention away from performance and toward consciousness. Not replacing worship, deepening worship. Not abandoning action, transforming perception within action. The real battle is not between remembrance and forgetfulness. The real battle is between presence and unconsciousness. Once you understand that, everything changes. Now attention matters because it shapes perception. Purpose matters because it shapes perception. Self-awareness matters because it shapes perception. Time matters because it shapes perception. All the teachings connect. The root issue was never information. The root issue was seeing. The world is full of signs. The heedless heart sees only objects, and once that becomes clear, the practical question finally emerges. How do you wake up? The goal is not perfection. The goal is interruption. Interrupting unconsciousness before it becomes identity. Practice number 1. The interruption audit. Before sleeping tonight, write down every major thing that captured your attention during the day. Not merely what distracted you, what captured you, what repeatedly pulled your awareness toward itself. This develops metacognitive awareness. You cannot reclaim attention you never observe, and attention is where Ghaflah often begins. Practice number 2. The hidden why question. 3 times each day, pause and ask, what am I serving right now? Notice the wording. Not what am I doing, what am I serving? Status, comfort, approval, security, fear, Allah. The answer may surprise you. This practice reconnects actions to intentions. It exposes hidden motives before they become permanent habits. Practice number 3. The 1-minute witness. Choose one ordinary event. Drinking water, opening a door, walking through a car park, watching rain hit a window. Pause for 60 seconds. Then ask, what sign of Allah is present here that I usually miss? Do not rush the answer. Train perception, because perception is precisely where Ghaflah operates. Ibn Arabi's project was never simply accumulating information, it was transforming sight. Teaching people how to see, and seeing changes everything. A person who notices signs inhabits a different world from a person who notices only objects. The same rain falls, different realities emerge, the same day unfolds, different hearts receive it. The same life passes, different souls awaken within it. None of these practices are complicated. That is the point. Ghaflah enters through ordinary moments. Wakefulness must return through ordinary moments as well. Small interruptions, repeated consistently, until presence becomes more familiar than distraction. Awakening begins the moment unconsciousness is interrupted. And that brings us back to where we started. Think again about the person from the beginning of this video. The one finishing another ordinary day, checking messages, watching videos, moving through routines. Nothing dramatic happened, but now you understand something you did not understand before. Life is not stolen only through major sins. Sometimes it is stolen through unnoticed absence, through drifting, through existing without witnessing, through seeing everything except what gives everything meaning. And this is why Ibn Arabi's discussion of Ghaflah is ultimately hopeful. His goal is not to frighten you, his goal is to wake you, because the moment you recognize heedlessness, you have already begun leaving it. The person asleep does not know he is asleep. The one who notices the veil has already seen beyond it. So tonight, do not ask whether you were busy. Do not ask whether you were productive. Do not ask whether you were successful. Ask a more dangerous question. What did my heart truly witness today? Because your answer reveals the direction of your life, not the image of your life, the reality of it. And reality is what Ibn Arabi spent his life calling us back toward. The greatest loss is not losing years of life. It is losing awareness while living them. And before you leave, sit with this question honestly. Think about the most automatic part of your daily routine, the moment you pass through without thinking, the action you perform almost unconsciously every day. What might Allah be showing you there that you have been missing all this time?